You know my favorite thing about the SK base? Sometimes we can go way off base and talk about things that aren't related to Star Wars. So let's talk about the Snyder Cut. So cool you got, acolytes. I'm Jedi Starkiller, and this is the SK Base. Today is a segment we're calling Way Off Base, where we talk about various nerdy topics that aren't related to Star Wars, but I still want to talk about with you guys. For this first episode, I thought we'd discuss the 4-hour epic on everyone's mind, Justice League: The Snyder Cut. We'll talk about the things I liked, the things I didn't like, and perhaps more importantly, my thoughts on the impact that this will have on the DCEU and fandom moving forward. Before I get started, I want to acknowledge that I am the target audience for this movie. I'm a big fan of DC Comics, and honestly, I don't completely hate the DCEU. Now, Zack Snyder and I have a fundamental difference of opinion on the character of Superman, but I still liked the ultimate cut of BVS, and I really loved the 4-hour ultimate edition of Watchmen with Tales of the Black Freighter weaved in and out. I went into this knowing that I'm probably going to enjoy it. I mean, I'm the guy who, lost his stuffing in the theater when I saw parademons on screen during Batman v Superman. So, just the existence of, Darkseid is enough to make me excited for this movie. And when it came to the theatrical cut of Justice League, I didn't entirely hate it. I had a lot of problems with it. I thought Steppenwolf was a really bad villain, but overall, I found things to like about Joss Whedon's cut of the Justice League. But I was more excited to see Snyder's cut in the end. So, with that out of the way, let's go ahead and jump into the stuff that I did like. This is the Justice League movie that we deserved from the get-go. Zack Snyder wanted to make this movie, and it's very clear when you watch it that Snyder had a vision not only for this movie, but for the DCEU as a whole. And for Warner Brothers and Joss Whedon to come in after his personal tragedy and just completely change the movie from what he originally envisioned was a disservice to his art. And so I'm really happy that we got to see what Zack wanted us to see the first time through. Visually, this movie is stunning. The cinematography is on point. If there's one thing Zack Snyder knows how to do, it's frame an image. And I know it's partly because of his fascination with comic books that he's just so good at making a panel. And so the movie looks very, very good. The cinematography and the camera work are just spot on. One thing I noticed immediately in this cut was the Junkie XL score. No shade to Danny Elfman, I love him so much, but it didn't fit the right tone. Danny Elfman's score didn't fit the right tone for the Justice League. And the Junkie XL score underneath definitely felt more in line with Zack Snyder's vision and his universe. One thing the theatrical cut did so poorly that this knocked out of the park was establishing the character development for certain characters in the movie, especially Cyborg and the Flash. Cyborg's part was cut so much in the original Justice League to the point where he was barely effective as a plot device. Same with the Flash. The amount of character development that these two get, the importance that they play in this movie and in the DCEU at large, so much better in this movie. It really makes you look at the original cut of Justice League and see what a shame what Joss Whedon and Warner Brothers did to those characters was. Because they deserved so much better, and it was nice to see them get the development that those characters deserved. They've made me want to see a Flash movie, want to see a Cyborg movie, just based on this cut of the film. So, hands down, I love that. And along with the heroes, the villains got so much more out of this cut too. Steppenwolf was a cookie cutter villain with almost no real motivation in the first cut of this film, but here it's so much better. Just the presence of Darkseid gives Steppenwolf so much more motivation and makes him scary too. Like, him being brutalizing Amazons makes him scary. Him brutalizing Amazons makes him actually scary for the audience to watch. We feel like he's a real threat. But then to see him, who is established as such a threat, cowering before the power of Darkseid, really makes you question how strong Darkseid is. And then using Darkseid in place of Steppenwolf in the flashback scene was another moment of sheer brilliance. It just works so much better. The villains in this cut of the movie are some of the best villains they could have used. Like, absolutely leagues better than the original cut. And lastly, I'll admit it, the fan service. I mean, I saw Granny Goodness and Desaad. We heard talk of the anti-life equation. Like, these things just make the hair on my arm stand up. I love them so much. And so yeah, I definitely dug that. But it's not all sunshine and rainbows. So let's talk about the things I didn't like. Alright, buckle up. Here comes the bad. First up, this movie is long. Like, it feels every bit of its 4 hours. And this is coming from a person who doesn't hate long-form storytelling. I like The Lord of the Rings. I already said I'm a big fan of the 4-hour cut of Watchmen. But this movie plods along at such a slow pace. Like, the first half of the movie, the first 2 hours, which is a feature-length film unto itself, are all just setup and exposition and a couple of action set pieces, but most of those don't actually progress the plot. We see Cyborg, who is essentially the main character of this film, for 10 seconds in the first half of this movie. Like, the second half of this movie feels radically different and like a much better film than the first half. So I'm just not a fan of the pacing. And then part of that pacing is the slow motion. Like, someone did the math, 10% of the film, 25 minutes, is slow motion. I'm as much of a fan of slow motion shots as anybody. When they're used well, they paint a beautiful picture. But Snyder was gratuitous in his use of slow motion, to say the least. Like, there were so many fight scenes where it went from normal speed shot into a slow motion shot, back to a normal speed shot, back to a slow motion shot, and back and forth for a minute every 2 seconds. And it feels like too much. Okay, this is gonna sound like I'm backtracking. I know I said I preferred the Junkie XL score, but the soundtrack was still kind of weird in spots. Like, some of the song choices that they had, specifically surrounding Aquaman, moments like the lady singing by the water, whatever that song was during the slow motion sequence while he's drinking a beer. And then there's the whole weird Amazonian singing that happens every time Wonder Woman does literally anything in the movie. It just feels awkward and out of place. Like, we blew too much of the budget on CGI, so we couldn't come up with even one more motif for Wonder Woman. And what was with the 4:3 aspect ratio? In what universe was that a good decision? I really would like to know where they came up with that, because whoever came up with that decision should be fired. I feel like it's very clearly a budget issue, where the movie might have been cut for 4:3 for like IMAX, but they just, rather than fixing the aspect ratio for HBO Max, they just released it the way it was because it was cheaper, because they'd already poured enough money into this movie. Like, it doesn't look good on anyone's TV. And so I feel like that was a really poor decision, but I blame WB on that one. That one's not Zack's fault, I don't feel. I still fundamentally disagree with Zack Snyder's interpretation of Superman. And not just because I don't understand his vision. I get his vision. I just feel like it's incongruous with the DC universe as a whole. Like, Superman stands to be this bright, cheesy, hopeful figure in direct contrast to characters like Batman. And I feel like once again, Zack Snyder is just washing away any amount of hopefulness that this character could represent. Also, I don't like how Superman is presented as this all-powerful being who's light years away from the power level of anyone else in the Justice League. Like, when Superman shows up, he single-handedly can fight Steppenwolf, even though the entire league couldn't handle him before. It really calls into question, what's the purpose of having a team-up movie? What's the purpose of a Justice League if all we really need is Superman, because Superman solos anyone? Like, I'm not against the idea that Superman is perhaps the most powerful member of the Justice League, but the idea that he just comes in and single-handedly turns the tide of everything felt a little ridiculous to me. Like, it just seemed to undermine the team theme of the movie. And one more thing about Superman, I was bothered by the black suit. I'm a big fan of the black suit in the comics, but in this movie it didn't serve any real purpose. In the comics, it's a Kryptonian regeneration suit designed to help him recover after dying or nearly dying. But in this movie, it's just an aesthetic choice. And like, there's no narrative reason for him to be wearing this black and gray suit. And so all it does is serve to further wash away any amount of color in this universe, and especially any amount of bright hopefulness from this character. Like, at the very end of the movie, when he opens up his suit and he's still wearing the black suit, it just doesn't make any sense to me. And so it took something that I was excited for, to see Black Suit Superman, and made me less happy that I got it. And my last point that I'm going to bring up in this video, there were just too many characters to introduce in this film. I hate to bring up the gripe that constantly gets bandied about, that they needed more solo movies before getting to this film. But in the case of the way this story is told, they definitely did. This is Cyborg's movie. His connection to the mother boxes, like, everything about this film screams Cyborg being the main character, or at least the most important character. He has the best arc in the film, gives one of the best performances. Like, this is his movie, and he doesn't get the opportunity to shine the way he should, because we have to spend the first 2 hours of the film introducing you to every other character before we get to his movie. And if we had had a Flash movie, an Aquaman movie, if we'd had those films before this one, then we could have cut easily an hour and a half out of this film and really made it focus on Cyborg, and that just would have been a really good choice. So yeah, I hate to bring that up because I know it's constantly said, but this film needed less exposition and introduction to other characters and more focus on Cyborg and his story. Wow, that was a lot of cons. But don't get me wrong, I really enjoyed the movie. And if I had to give it a rating, I'd probably give it an 8.5 out of 10. I thoroughly enjoyed this movie, flaws and all. And the way that I rate movies is by how much I enjoyed them while I was watching them, how much I want to talk about them after they're done, and how likely I am to rewatch them. And I'm very likely to rewatch this movie, and I want to continue talking about it because it made me think, and I think good art makes people think. Also, once again, I was just so happy to see Zack Snyder's vision brought to life. Whether I agree with every decision he made is not the point, but the fact is, WB hired him to give his vision for the Justice League, and to hire Joss Whedon to essentially recut the film into something almost wholly unrecognizable was shameful. And I'm just really glad that Zack Snyder, as a creative, I'm really glad that he got to share his version of the movie. But the final thing I want to bring up is the potentially dangerous precedent that I feel this movie might set, not just for the DCU, but for all of fandom going forward. We've been getting this feeling lately that people can bully movie studios into doing whatever they want. We saw this with not only... Now, Sonic the Hedgehog was better served with the new character design, but it doesn't change the fact that it feels like an angry mob on the internet forced the studio to change an entire decision. And the Snyder Cut feels very similar on the surface, where fans seemingly bullied a studio into making a decision. And I'm really nervous that that's where fandom is going to try to lay roots and make its stand from now on. Just in the Star Wars fandom, we saw the joke tweet about release the Lucas cut of the sequels. And like, joke or not, it's this sort of rhetoric of bullying studios into doing what you want them to do that I feel can be a hindrance to art moving forward. We're so critical of not just movie studios, but directors and writers and performers for their vision. Like, art is meant to be created by an artist and enjoyed by an audience. And whether you enjoy that art or you don't, that's your opinion. And you don't get to make the objective claim for other people that that art is bad or that they're bad for liking said art. And one of the things that I'm worried about is that thanks to the Snyder Cut, we're going to see more people pushing studios to make the art that they want to see, to replace the art that they didn't like with art that they will prefer. And it just feels like a dangerous, toxic line that we're walking. And I prefer if we could all just enjoy or not enjoy art and allow each other to feel the way that we do without either side getting toxic with the other. I just don't want the legacy of the Snyder Cut to promote bullying and toxicity in any fandom. So what were your thoughts on the Snyder Cut? Did you like it? Did you hate it? Too much slow motion? Or was just seeing Granny Goodness standing next to Desaad enough for you to love it like it was for me? And more importantly, was it better than Endgame? Let me know in the comments down below. In brightest day, in blackest night, this is the way.
You are now leaving the SK base. Don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe. And never forget, the Force will be with you, always.